Hello and welcome. Here we are. Welcome to this question and answer. Let me check the view here. Yeah, this question and answer session for those of you signed up for the Breakup with Emotional Eating, or maybe you're just here because you want to understand a little bit more, which is also wonderful. Welcome. So I received such a great response to this opportunity to field questions. And I realized being on Memorial Day weekend, there's graduations, I'm on a flight, I'm doing this. And so, I'm considering, although I have your questions and I'm going to answer them, if we want to do some follow-up at some point, either to these questions, or maybe you're somebody who's just getting into the course and you're going to have some questions as you start going through things. We could potentially do this again. So just keep that in mind and let me know, those of you watching the replay, if that's something that would really serve. I think I would like to do that because I see so many of you signing up for the course and working through it, and I just really want to honor that and say great job. So, as we start today, just taking a moment to make sure we're comfortable, taking a moment to make sure we're present, right? Sometimes that's not the easiest thing in the world. So, I'm certainly, I like to start with my feet flat on the floor, really feeling the earth pushing up to meet me, supporting me, and that helps me be more conscious and present. Yeah. So with that, I wanted to start with some of the written in questions first, because I think a couple of them are really important and will help us set a foundation for what the heck are we talking about, so that no matter where you are in the course, you've got some background with which to understand the rest of the questions. So this first question is, how do I tell what state my nervous system is in? What a great question, right? And for those of you who may not have gotten into a lot of the coursework yet, this is really the subject and the focus of the integration work for Module 1, which is, hey, let's start seeing where your nervous system is on a kind of on a day-to-day basis. And I will say, this is so important, understanding your nervous system and understanding the state that you're in, because although it's not the only factor that relates to emotional eating, it is always at play. It's always at play with an emotional eating experience in some way. So it's just such a foundational piece of knowledge that you get to start to discover. Getting to know your system, what state it's in, what impacts it, both in a positive way and in a way that, is more activating. So let's talk about that a little bit. I think I'd like to briefly describe the three states, right? And what you might notice in each of those states, both what's going on in your mind and what's going on physically, so that you can kind of, even though everybody's nervous system is different and you individually might notice something entirely different from somebody else, at least this will give you something to kind of try on and something to start to notice. A lot of the people that are drawn to my work and that I work with find that they might be disconnected from their nervous system. And that's very common. And it's actually very normal and natural. Sometimes we tend to think, oh, there's something wrong with me because I'm not connected, I'm not embodied, I don't know what state my nervous system is in. But actually, it's a very natural and normal consequence of either earlier in life trauma or just accumulated stress, right? It makes sense that we would not want to be involved if there's pain involved, if there's just, general difficulties. It makes sense that we might just sort of disconnect and be a little bit unaware of what's going on inside when it's tough in there, right? Sometimes that's the best thing that we can do. So I want to just kind of normalize that first of all. It's not the best place to live life, right? Disconnected. So there's a lot that we miss out on, and that we thrive when we are able to be embodied. But it requires for us to open back up and become more familiar with and working with our system. It requires a sense of safety, right? It can be very, very challenging, and also I would say counterproductive to go digging in and trying to open up to a system that doesn't feel safe. So there's a very specific way that we like to go about that, where we first develop safety so that when we do go in and start to be aware of what's going on in the body, it's not an overwhelming, scary experience. And that's something that's really important, and that we have so many beautiful practices that we can use in order to do that. Excuse me. So, okay. So having said all of that, I just want you to know, if you are somebody who feels like they're disconnected with your body or your nervous system, just know that it is absolutely possible to come back into relationship with that in a safe way. I know from being disconnected with my body and my nervous system for well over 30 years that is something that's possible. So I want to encourage you and remind you it's normal. It can be so normal and natural, right? There's nothing wrong with you. There was a really good reason why you shut down. And when we provide the safety to come back to that and to become embodied again, that's what's needed to be able to do that work. So the 3 states, okay. I developed a nervous system model based on the graduated cylinders, and actually I recently got one. Someone sent to me because I use this a lot. But you remember back in chemistry class when we were in high school chemistry, and we had these cylinders. They have numbers on them, 10 to 100, 1 to 10 is what we use. And this represents your nervous system, right? So we can think of it in 3 different parts. So when our cylinder is filled up, right? When there's liquid in our cylinder, kind of in that 1 to 3 range, 1 to 3.5, something in there, we're in the parasympathetic ventral vagal state. Okay, so there's 2 different branches of the parasympathetic, and we don't have to get too deep into it, but what I want you to really understand is that this ventral vagal parasympathetic, that's the place of rest and digest. You may have heard that referred to that before. And in this state, I'll describe some of the things that you might notice both physically and mentally. And this is how you can tell what state am I in, okay? Because when you're in this ventral vagal, this is our more natural state of being. This is where we were designed to live most of our time. And when we're in this state, we feel calm and yet alive, right? We're ready for life. We're open. We're curious. We are open to connection with others. We're open to connection with ourselves. In this state, we're more likely to have access to our creativity, our problem solving ideas, right? We feel safe. We feel like, okay, something could be going on, but yeah, I feel relatively okay. Like things are going to be okay for me. All right. In this state, our breath is rather, for us individually, it's going to be different for everybody, but our breathing is, regular, steady, on the slower side. Same with our heart rate. We're probably not sensing a lot of tension throughout our body. Our stomachs might feel fine. We're probably not experiencing any kind of digestive woes or anything like that. It is our state of, yeah, this is nice. This is where I like to be. Okay. When we move up in the cylinder, we're moving up, in the 3.5 to say 7 range, in this middle range. This would be our sympathetic state. And this is a spectrum, right? So as we add liquid, we're moving up and noticing different things the higher and higher we get on the cylinder. So the sympathetic is all about mobilization for the sake of survival, right? We also call it our fight or flight system, right? But that kind of denotes, I think, a sense of, oh no, I shouldn't be in the sympathetic, right? But that's not true at all, actually. We need some sympathetic energy. Oh man, I got this presentation. I got this, I'm meeting this new person. I'm whatever, right? It's okay to have, I'm running a race. I'm XYZ. A little bit of sympathetic energy, heck yeah, that is what gives us the energy to go out there and explore and to be curious and to do things. So it's not that the sympathetic state is bad by any means, right? But we can see as we move up in the cylinder and we get more towards those higher levels that we might start to experience a lot of anxiety, maybe some panic. Things are not okay. I need to be in motion. Have you ever felt like, oh my gosh, I'm just going from one thing to another, like I'm like a bee or something, and I can't get settled? I'm just, that's your mobilization. It's telling you safety means be on the move right now. You might feel hyper vigilant, really aware of what's in your environment. You might start at the upper end of the range. You might start to interpret your world in ways that are threatening. So you might look at a neutral face and be like, oh, they're scowling at me. You might hear a noise and startle easily. Something, and when you're in the upper ranges of the sympathetic, something like needing to step on your brakes and stop your car really fast, that might have a big impact on your system. You might say, I feel like I'm kind of overreacting to things. I'm really irritable. I feel like I'm in danger. I feel like tigers are chasing me. That's the upper end of the sympathetic. Some things you might be noticing in your body when you're in the sympathetic is faster breathing, faster heart rate. For you, maybe you feel dry mouth. Maybe you feel tension in your jaw, in your shoulders, a tightening in your belly. What I call, instead of like the nice little butterflies of being excited about something, I call them bats in my stomach. Like I really feel there's something in there moving around, flying around. You might have that uneasy feeling in your belly. You might have other kinds of tension. You might get into a situation where you notice, for you, some people say, my hands start tingling, or I start to get a headache, a migraine, those kinds of things. And those are all very, very normal and natural. So you get to notice for yourself, what are the symptoms in my own body. And then sometimes you may notice your body before you notice, oh, I'm struggling here because I'm nervous about, having to be with this person that's challenging for me. Or, oh, I didn't realize that this thing coming up was, causing me to some nervousness, but my belly is telling me that it is, right? So these are some of the things that you might notice in the sympathetic state. And then the third state is when our cylinder is really getting full. We're above 7, right? We're in that 7 to 10 range. And unfortunately, it's possible to overfill your cylinder such that it is overflowing and there is nothing else getting in, right? And this state is the other branch of the parasympathetic, but most often we refer to it as the freeze, overwhelm, or the shutdown, right? And in this state, this is where our body says, you know what, fight or flight's not going to work here. What we need to do is just go inside. We just need to shut down. We need to just kind of numb out, right? Up at the top end of this range, we might even disassociate a little bit. And that can look like a lot of different things. It sounds like, whoa, disassociation, but it's just kind of checking out, right? When you're there, but you're not really there, right? And that's the state of overwhelm. And in that state, the body is conserving. It is a very low energy state. So you may find yourself unable to get off the couch. You may find yourself wanting to crawl under your bed and hide, right? You probably don't feel like being particularly social or even to be looking at what's going on. You just want to ignore everything and just be as protective as possible. You may in this state, it's very different for people. And a lot of times this is a state where it's most likely that you're not noticing your body. So it may be, sometimes people say, I don't feel anything, I don't feel anything, I don't feel anything. It may be that their system is in this overwhelmed place. And that's the kind of place where it's least likely for us to be in touch with what's going on in our body. But it's a very low energy state where you seem to, even when I rest at night, I'm not feeling restored. I might have, this is the place we shut down a lot of energy going to the systems in our body that aren't essential for short-term survival. So we might be getting sick a lot. Our digestion might be struggling. Our metabolism is going to go down, right? Everything is about conservation in this state. So all the things that are kind of associated with that are going to be hallmarks of the overwhelm, the freeze state. So those are the three states. And as I said, it can be challenging. Don't judge yourself if you're not really sure, or if you have some, it takes a little bit of time sometimes for us to get into communication with our nervous system and to be able to work with it. I like to think of it like, especially if you are someone who's experienced either trauma or a lot of just accumulated stress and you needed to cut off from the nervous system in the body in some way. Coming back to it can kind of being like inviting a foreign exchange student from some random little tiny country in some other part of the world. You don't speak their language, they don't speak yours, and you guys are here living life together trying to figure out what the other one is saying. Yeah, it can be challenging, but absolutely doable when you are open and paying attention, and especially when you have guidance and tools, right? When you have guidance and tools, you know what to look for. You can making sure also that you feel safe, right? If you don't feel safe with this person, it's going to be extra challenging for you to get to know each other. So these are the kinds of things that we need in order to come back to and get familiar with our nervous system, but is so possible and so very worth it, right? You may be somebody who says, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I've been living in the sympathetic, I think, my whole life, or I've been shut down for the last 15 years and didn't even know it. Your experience is very common. It's not dysfunctional. It made sense at the time, but now we get to explore how do we turn that around and start to come back to your nervous system and your sense of safety. Let me pause here before going on to question 2. And I would love, Judy, I think just Jody, based on just that little bit that you shared with me, I think it might be the perfect time with that background to jump into your question. Is it now a good time for you?
Yeah, so after hearing that, I'm thinking I'm probably disconnected from my system because it's hard for me to tell if where I'm at and what state it is and how that affects the emotional eating.
Yeah. And so how are you feeling about that now? Having listened to, some of this information, do you feel like you've got a little bit of either guidance or things that you can start to look for? Or how does it feel to you?
A little bit. The hard thing is I feel like I'm a naturally calm person, but it's hard to know, is my system kind of calm? And like I said, I'm not sure what state it's in. It's kind of hard for me to tell.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that sometimes when our system, when we're not quite sure, we can look at what's going on in life, right? Because that is a really good indicator for us if we are connected and if we are able to help regulate our system. So if, for example, you're somebody who is struggling with emotional eating, like everybody in this space, that's a really good signal. Oh, I probably uh, don't know how to regulate my system very well because I'm using food to do it for me. And that's largely what the emotional eating is about, to change my state, right? I'm starting to go into a state that's not going to be comfortable, right? So I'm using the food to either help me come down or to help me not get to that state in the first place. And I think that's really an important distinction to make, because sometimes people will say, no, I feel I'm not having emotions. I don't think I'm emotionally eating. It can't be as a result of my emotions because I'm not really feeling much. And it's when especially when we started these habits, these coping mechanisms early on in life, we've become so efficient at turning to them, and our brain knows the instant when we need to go there so that we can avoid getting into the emotional state or getting into an uncomfortable state. So we are so good at cutting it off before we even get there that means we stop realizing that we're using it for that purpose. And so that can be a little bit tricky sometimes, but that is definitely one of the ways that we can tell maybe I don't have the tools quite yet, or the connection with my nervous system to be able to regulate it without using something outside of me. And that's not a bad thing, right? Thank goodness we have things, even if they are outside of us, that help us regulate. It's just not the ideal situation. Yeah. So what else do you notice? And maybe this is something, that you can kind of take away, and as you go through the rest of the modules, maybe some of the things will open up for you. But
Mhm.
what, if anything, are you kind of noticing about life in general?
Um, well, lately it's been kind of challenging.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then when you're talking about um emotions too, obviously there's some emotions going on with the food,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure what emotions they are exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will also say is so common, right? When we've gotten, for whatever reason, right? We learned like there are certain emotions. I don't do them, right? They are dangerous to me. They do not feel safe for me to engage with. So yeah, we actually use the food to avoid them, to distract from them, so that because they feel threatening, right? Yeah, so there's a lot of really powerful insight that you're sharing already, that you don't know what those emotions are. And there's actually a module in this little mini course that helps you understand that a little bit better, and just notice and maybe get to know your emotions a little bit outside the moment when you're feeling them, right? So that's one of the most important aspects of the programs that I teach, is not all of our work is in the moment when I'm feeling triggered to eat, right? That's actually kind of like level two. Level one is working on these things when I am feeling good, when I am feeling calm, when I might be able to access my emotions. In the moment when they're coming up and I'm feeling really threatened by them, no way, right? That's not the time that I'm going to have the resources or the capacity to really get in there and say, okay, what is this emotion? I'm going to protect myself and not want to go there in that moment. So what can I do outside the moment when I'm feeling relatively resourced to explore my emotions, so that in that triggered moment they start to feel safer and safer, and I can understand them better. That's such a key, is working outside the moment and having the tools to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would be excited for you to, after you get to that module. And again, this is a mini course, so this is a little introduction to some of the concepts. So it shouldn't, probably won't take you that long to get through some of these modules and get some exploration under your belt. And at that time, we can explore a little bit more what that looks like for you.
Okay.
Yeah. And as we go through and talk about some of the other questions, please feel free if you have some insights, or something triggers like, oh, this is the question that I really want to know. Please just raise your hand, jump on, whatever. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Perfect. And I'll say welcome to Dawn. Dawn, let me know, sweetie, if you do have a question that you'd like me to address in this time today. I'm just kind of going back and forth, fielding some questions from that were emailed to us, and then questions from you guys as well. Okay, awesome. Let me then dive into question number two. Now, question number two and three, actually, I got a lot of questions that are pretty much the same question here. So I know this is on your guys' mind. I know it's on everybody's mind who struggles with emotional eating. And it was certainly on my mind for decades. And that question is how to be consistent with the tools. Like, okay, you've given me some tools now. Oh yeah, these tools are good. These tools, oh, I noticed they help me in this case or whatever, but I can't be consistent with them. And it's the same thing. I know what to do. I'm just not doing it. And I have a lot of thoughts on this question. And I really think it comes down to five things. And I'll just list them briefly and then we'll go into each one of them. One of them is your capacity, how much capacity you have. Okay. And we'll get into these. The second one is sometimes we have rebel parts that are sick and tired of being rigid and bossed around and structured and told what to do and restricted, and they don't take kindly anymore, right? They've reached the point where they're like, I'm sick of that and I am not playing those games anymore. We may have underlying belief systems that make it hard for us to be consistent. We also need the right approach, a gentle approach that helps us take steps along the way as opposed to jump all in and try to do everything overnight. And the fifth thing is when we lack support, we're not consistent. So let's go into each of these a little bit more. And as we do, I want to start this conversation by sharing a concept that I use in the Freedom Course, and that is your capacity. So I talk about your capacity being kind of like a bank account. You could imagine actually having an account, right, that represents your capacity. And that account, certain things add to that account, right? You have more capacity dollars, and certain things subtract from that account, right? And if you don't have capacity, I don't care who you are, I don't care how bad you want it, I don't care how much pain you're in right now, if there's no capacity for you to spend on the tools, there's no capacity for you to spend on the tools. If there's no money in your bank account, there's no money in your bank account. You can't spend money that you don't have. You can't spend capacity that you don't have. You may be dying for a new pair of shoes or a new purse or a meal or whatever it is. And if there's no money in the account, you're not going to get those things. And if there's no capacity in the account, you're not going to use the tools. And that's so important to understand because, and really, this was kind of flushed out for me a long time ago in my early work with people. I was noticing there was really two groups of people. There were the people who were taking the tools and the practices and they were putting them into place, using them, and coming back and saying, oh my gosh, my relationship with food is totally changing. I am, I've lost this weight and I'm feeling so free. I'm not even thinking about food. All the great things, right? And so I really believed in the system and the tools and the practices. But then there was this whole other group of people saying to me, I can't use the tools and practices no matter how hard I try. I'm just not implementing anything. Nobody was coming and saying, I'm using the tools, but they're not working for me. So it made me very curious. Okay, what's going on for this group of people that they can't use the tools, that they can't stay consistent? And that led me down a little deeper into the world of understanding trauma and the nervous system capacity and all things somatic. And what I learned was this group of people who wanted it so bad, but was so frustrated by the fact they couldn't be consistent, had no capacity. Their nervous systems, in our example here, were full. And when your system is full, you can't take it, there's no more going in, and you cannot be consistent with anything, right? And that's so important because these people would have said, if I said, why can't you use the tools? They would say, oh, I'm too broken. I'm too lazy. I'm a failure at everything. I never stick with anything. I just need to try harder. Whatever their silly excuse was. And that is something that I feel like that's my purpose in the world, is to make sure people understand none of that is true. None of that is true. The five things that I'm going to share with you right now are the reason why you've struggled to be consistent. And when you have what you need, you will be consistent. You can be consistent, regardless of what your experience has been so far. So this issue of capacity is just so important. So the foundation of my work with people is, let's first get you the capacity that you need. And then we'll get the tools, and then we'll start using them and evaluating along the way, and see what you need, what we need to put in your account for you to be successful. That's step number one. Always, always, always. And it has nothing to do with your willpower. It has nothing to do with your, whether you are a weak person or not. It's simply a matter of there's either capacity or there's not. I also mentioned that sometimes we can have rebel parts. And that's really something really important to look at. A lot of times people will come and say, gosh, I don't know what's wrong with me. I used to be able to stick to a diet. I used to be able to do this and that. And now I can't even, do it for a day. So, and I also want to mention these 5 things, they work together, and it's not just one, right? It's not just this 100%. It's usually all of them, right? In some combination. So, just know that it's not necessarily, which one is it for me? It's probably all of them. But we have these parts and they're just like, you know what? I'm really fed up from all the restriction, all the telling me who I get to be, and all the, everything being so hard and so rigid and all of that. And I'm not having it anymore. And that's a really big deal. And it plays out in those parts are not willing to be restrained anymore. And so we get to explore with them, we get to develop a relationship with those parts through the IFS model or the parts work model, and get to know them and let them know, yeah, you're really important, right? You're keeping me from having a life that has no fun and is strictly rigidity. So working with our parts can be very important. And the third one that I mentioned is our belief system. We will always, always, always act in accordance with our underlying belief system. Always. Now, we can use willpower once in a while to override that, but it's not going to get us where we want to go. And that may be something that you're experiencing a lot. It's like, okay, I had a good day, or I was good for a day, and then I fell off and all that kind of stuff. We want to look at your underlying belief systems and see if they are inconsistent with the action that you want to take and the person that you want to become. So, for example, it could be anything, but just to throw one example out there, if you're somebody who says, I'm always going to struggle with food, I'm always going to have a weight problem, nothing works out for me, I'm too old for that, any of those kinds of underlying beliefs, you're going to act consistently with them. Your beliefs are creating your emotional state, and your emotional state is going to dictate your actions, which become your habits, which become your life circumstance. So any behavior that you have, there's an attached underlying belief system to that action. So if we want to change our behavior, rather than going after the behavior, we can find out what the underlying belief system is, change it there, and then our action is aligned and we're not even trying. We're just being ourselves. And that's when it becomes effortless to be the person that you know yourself to be, the person that you want to be, that's taking action that's in alignment with the health you want, the vitality you want, etc. And the fourth thing I mentioned is the approach. So often in this world, we are encouraged to go all or nothing, right? If we're going to start a diet, it's going to look like this. It's going to be, okay, starting Monday, I am only drinking green smoothies and I'm going to go to the gym for 90 minutes, 6 days a week, or whatever it is, right? We jump all in and we try to do things that are, goes back to the capacity, that are beyond our capacity, things that it's just too much for where we are. And so it requires more of a nuanced approach. And so in the course, I teach a ladder method, right? So if you're down here where you are today, no judgment around it, and you want to be up here, what we usually do is we try to jump from where we are. We try to jump from the ground to 20 feet in the air, right? Who jumps 20 feet in the air? Exactly nobody, ever, right? But I stood on the ground and tried to jump 20 feet in the air for 30 some years, right? All I need to do is, okay, this time I'm going to make it up. I'm going to stick with it this time, right? Jump, fall on my face, right? Over and over and over. And instead of looking at that data and saying to ourselves, what would it look like to build a ladder instead? Step by step, rung by rung, right? Instead of thinking of it that way, we say, what's wrong with me that I can't jump 20 feet in the air. Okay, I just need to try harder. I just need this. That's it. Starting Monday, right? And we follow that approach again and again and again, and it just keeps us falling on the ground, right? But with a ladder where we can meet you where you are, create a ladder especially for you. What's the one step that I can take over the next 7 days? And then what's the next step that I can take over the next 7 days? And building that ladder, that's how we stay consistent. When we pick steps and pick strategies that meet us where we are. And that's a little bit of an art, but once you learn it, it's the quickest way to get up here. And the brain says, oh, but if you would just keep jumping, we'd get there so quick. Oh, really? Okay. Well, that must be why, I spent 30 some years trying to do that versus, building my ladder and scaling straight up. So that's the fourth thing of why it's challenging to remain consistent. And the fifth thing is that piece I mentioned that was support. When we have support, it's absolutely shocking how different we can show up for ourselves when we have a space where we can receive support and guidance and a community. There's so much motivation that comes from knowing that you're going to be in that space and offered the opportunity to share yourself and your experience. When you have a place to be seen and heard and supported, you act differently. You really do. You take different action. And I know for myself, I thought I knew intuitively for a long time that I needed to open myself to support, but I didn't believe that I was worth the time, worth the money. I didn't think that I thought I should be able to do it myself, right? And because of that, I talked myself out of getting that support so many times. I would get on discovery calls and I would think about it for a second, and then ultimately I would always say, no, 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 you should be able to do this yourself. And finally, taking a piece of advice that someone gave me that I always share now, and that is, don't make the decision of whether or not to get support from the person that you are today. Let the person that you're ready to become make that decision for you. And that was such a light bulb for me because I knew the person I was ready to become was screaming, yes, 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 do whatever it takes because you are so worth it. And the life that you get to live is so worth it. So consistency really is possible when you have these 5 things that I'm talking about. The one thing I would just say to you is please stop beating yourself up for not being consistent. There is real reason. And if consistency was easy and just a matter of willpower, we wouldn't be where we are as a nation right now. It should be so obvious. And so it's so frustrating. Why do we keep putting resources into trying all the things that don't work, that haven't worked? And yet we do, and it makes sense why we do, because we keep getting fed that that's the way, but it's not. And I think you can ask anybody who's been through the Freedom Program how that works and what the difference is between having these 5 resources to be consistent. Let me pause here and just see if you guys have any questions about anything so far, or if it'd be a good time to ask one of your questions. Definitely open to that. Okay, perfect. So let me move on then to question 3. I got 5 or 6 questions about movement in some form or another, but I'm going to focus on one question in particular because it's a little more detailed, and I think by hitting this question, I'm going to answer all the other variations on the movement question. She says, have you ever worked with endurance athletes and have they found success? I realize high levels of exercise add stress to the nervous system. I'm not willing to take exercise out of my life. In fact, during doing the nervous system check-ins recommended in module 1, I found the only time I was in the calm, alive 1 to 3 range is in the 1 or 2 hours after my morning workout. So yeah, there's so many things here, so many ways to break this question down. Have you ever worked with endurance athlete and have they found success? So I would start by saying I identify myself as an endurance athlete. As a matter of fact, last Sunday at this time, I was just finishing 26.2 miles marathon. So that counts, let me tell you, as an endurance event and a half. And, my own experience with exercise, with movement, with being an athlete in some form has really taught me a lot in addition to the research around exercise and the nervous system. I know for myself, it's a little bit sad because my relationship with exercise was not always healthy at all. In fact, I used exercise for many many years to offset the behavior of my binge eating so that I could keep my weight somewhere in check, because I couldn't stop my struggles with binge eating. And so I was a over exerciser, which had all of its own set of issues and struggles for me. So I come to this space with a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge from the research that we do have on exercise and our nervous systems. Thankfully, exercise is now one of my best friends, and I really rely on that as a powerful nervous system regulator. And it also gives me a lot of information about my nervous system. And so it's just another way that I can communicate with my system and understand things. So the first thing I want to ask about this question, and this maybe all of you listening have a question similar that you could ask in your life, even if it's not about exercise. But when you said, I am not willing to take my exercise out of my life, that was powerful. And I just want to offer the opportunity to explore that. Why? I'm not willing. It's important to you for some reason. And there's no judgment around that. There's no good or bad, but it might be a great place to explore what your relationship with exercise is without needing to change it based on what you find. Exercise right now, food for all of us right now, may be like a life preserver that we are using to navigate and get through life. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that, right? So even if we can see it, we don't have to beat ourselves up. We don't even have to go right in and change it. We can just notice that resistance. What is that resistance to going on a diet all about? What is that resistance to giving up or changing my exercise routine? What is that resistance about? Again, we don't have to change it, but understanding it can be really helpful. I also say about this idea about food being our life preserver, exercise, whatever it is, being our life preserver. If you're in the middle of the ocean and you're not a good swimmer, or maybe you can't swim at all, and you have this life preserver, and you enter a program or anything else, or you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to get rid of my emotional eating. I'm going to get rid of my exercise. I'm going to get rid of my life preserver, even though I'm out here in the middle of the ocean, right? How do you think that's going to work as a strategy? It's a useless, it's a strategy that's never going to get you anywhere. And what does that do to your system, right? Imagine being out in the water and I come along on my motorboat and I say, all right, give me the life preserver. We're going on a diet. No more sugar for you. Yeah, come on, give me the life preserver, right? You would be incredibly panicked to be in that, in the turmoil of life, in the waves, in the water without your safety net. So that is never a place of safety. And if you remember, what do we need to establish capacity? We need safety. So the approach that is often offered, how are we going to get control and take away and get off the sugar and blah, blah, blah. That's just me ripping away your life preserver and creating the lack of safety for you. Instead, let's learn how to swim. Let's learn how to swim, and you won't want the life preserver anymore. You'll be handing it to me saying, will you take this thing? It's limiting me. I want to go out and explore in the ocean, and this stupid life preserver around me is really keeping me from being able to do that. That's the approach that leads to success. Learn how to swim, and then the life preserver won't be useful anymore. It won't be wanted. It will let go of you, right? So I say that in the context of this exercise question, just because you don't, because it relates to the resistance around giving up or changing your exercise. You don't need to understand what's going on, what's behind that statement. I am unwilling. There doesn't have to be anything, right? It could just be, hey, I really like it and I love being outside, whatever. And that's fine too. It's just an invitation to see what that's about. Yeah, so let's move on with the kind of the exercise in general. There's so much research, so much incredible research. If you dive into this research, you will be shocked. Like, why isn't everyone screaming about exercise? It is so amazing for our mood and for our nervous system regulation. And and I think that for a long time we've been shamed into exercise, and exercising for the sake of calorie burning and all the things that we maybe not celebrated it as much and had fun with it because we think it has to look a certain way. But when we contract our muscles, they release chemicals, and these chemicals are like, researchers call them, when they call them the hope chemicals or something of that nature. They are so powerful in helping us feel our sense of well-being, right? We were born to move, and our bodies love it. Now, sometimes we're injured or we have pain, or we don't have capacity to move. And so that's something that we have to take into consideration. But generally speaking, the research on movement is really incredible. In fact, I always want to like get up and move, like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to be in motion. But as with anything, right, there's a point when exercise can become a significant stressor and may not be helpful. And so going back to our capacity discussion, we want to be aware for our own individual bodies. What is that point in which the exercise that I'm doing stops adding to my capacity account and starts to take out of my account? And of course, I'm not able to tell you, any one of you, it's this many minutes for you, right? Because all of our bodies are different. And our bodies are not only different, but your body is different. Your body is different from day to day, let alone throughout different phases of life, especially for a woman. Our adolescent bodies and our woman bodies and our perimenopausal and our menopausal bodies are all so different. And there's so much that relates to the state of our nervous system. I could never be at the performance level that I am right now at 53. I could have never achieved this at many of the decades in my life because my nervous system was already so overtaxed and overloaded. So there's a lot that goes into this, and this was something we could work on together. But I want to give you some valuable and important guidance just that you can kind of take away. So with this, I'm going to encourage you to kind of notice what's going on in your body as it relates, especially to your endurance activities. So, it is different for all of us. And I just want to point out that when we go past that line and are pushing our bodies with physical activity in the stressor as a stressor, right? We're actually not helping ourselves at all. And when we go into that place of stress, we tell the body is pre-programmed in those cases to produce cortisol, to hang on to weight, or even put weight on, because stress means we have to be prepared for whatever may come our way. We have to be prepared to fight the tiger, to withstand the famine, to, whatever our hunters and gatherer bodies need to do. And so when we are living in stress, under too much stress, our body is going to send out cravings. It's going to metabolize differently. and we're going to notice the effects. And it's also, of course, going to have an effect on our nervous system. If the body is not getting what it needs, or if it's being taxed too much, it's sending out a message. And 80% of the nervous system is information coming from the body to the brain. So what's going on in your body is huge when it comes to your nervous system regulation. 80%. So we're getting these messages coming up from the body's saying, hey, I don't have enough glucose. Hey, there's been too much inflammation as a result of too much, being pushed too much for too long. Then the brain's going to make a story that goes with that information, right? And so it's this loop that sometimes we can get in. And so we need to figure out for you, what is that point where you're filling capacity and not putting your body under stress, the same, stress, too much stress, day after day, because it will contribute to nervous system dysregulation and your inability to maybe spend more and more time in your ventral vagal 1 to 3 range. There's a lot of things that we can tell just, from one of the great benefits of a somatic experiencing practice, which is something that is developed in the course, is that it helps you learn more about your body. But some of the signs that you can use to help you understand what effect your exercise may be having is what's your resting heart rate, what's your breathing rate, how are you sleeping? Do you feel rested when you wake up? Do you feel irritable? How's your performance? Are you noticing that, gosh, I haven't been able to hit those goals, or I'm getting, slower on my runs, or I'm lifting less weight, or whatever it is? Is your performance going down? And that's a sign, by the way, not to push harder, but to give yourself a little bit of rest. Has there been changes in your appetite? Either way. For me, I notice sometimes if I'm getting into that range of being a little bit overtrained, maybe, that my eyesight I have a harder time seeing small print than I will otherwise. So, for us individually, there may be little clues, but there's also more sophisticated ways of measuring. If you have an Apple Watch, I'm not as familiar with all the data, but I do know that an Apple Watch gives you some really great information. I also am a big fan of the Oura Ring here. The Oura Ring gives me a lot of valuable information, especially I use it to help me train. It tells me about my sleep. It tells me about something called my heart rate variability, which is a great measure of how your nervous system is doing. It gives information about temperature and resting heart rate, respiratory rate, all kinds of things that really help me. So if I wake up in the morning and I say, I am not feeling very energetic, I'm feeling a little bit not so great, I might look at my phone and say, oh, okay, my heart rate variability is in the 30s or whatever. This is not the day for the hard interval training that I had planned. Okay, I'm not going to push it. My body is telling me it doesn't have the capacity for this training today. So I'm going to wait, right? I might take the day off. I might do some active, whatever, just some walking, something easier, and then wait for the next day, right? So it's about listening to the body instead of having, this is the training we're doing. I'm not, too bad. We're doing it whether you want it or not. That's where we tend to get into trouble. But if we're listening to the body, and maybe there's a period in life, maybe you do want to continue, right where you are, and you're not ready to kind of look at that or to make adjustments. But maybe you'd be willing to make sure that your body has what it needs in order to not be under that stress. So for me, for example, and also you might want to look at, am I just continuing to do this for months and months and months on end? Like, just for example, marathon's over. I have a 10K tomorrow. After that, I'm switching it all up. No more, 20-mile runs. I'm actually going to train for a mile. I'm going to train to run the fastest mile I can. Race is the 1st of August. And so I'm actually very intentionally giving my body a whole new way of working out and being taxed, right? Without the miles, I'm going to be doing this. And so it can be really good to kind of switch it up and, maybe not give your body a break. And then I can go back to whatever. So that may be something to consider as well. But some of the things you can do to give your body more of what it needs so that it's not under as much stress, even though you may be asking a lot of it, are supplements. I really, really love the MitoPure mitochondrial support. MitoPure, it's the company is Timeline. They've done a great job of providing some third-party research, and I'm a huge fan. It gives the mitochondria energy, and that's a whole nother topic we could talk about, which is the biology of our nervous system. But that's going to have to wait for another day. Um, Forbose by Bulletproof is another product that can really help you recover. So you can either take it every day during those periods when you're training hard, or you could take it, say, if you've got a couple of hard days a week, you could take it on those hard days to give your body a little bit more, help it recover a little bit faster. So then it's not in that stress state, sending out those messages. I also made sure during that heavier training time to have electrolytes, up to my protein to 130 to 150 grams a day, dialed in my nutrition a little bit more. I was really careful with alcohol, because if I'm asking my body to do all of this, I'm not going to also ask it to detoxify from certain things, right? Definitely. And I changed when I ate. Normally, I don't like to eat before I exercise, but if I'm going to go on a 20-mile run, yeah, my body's going to need some fuel to do that. Prioritizing sleep. Yeah. So these are the bottom line, get curious. Be curious not only about why am I doing this, but what is my body really telling me? Is there some little modifications that I might be able to make? Obviously, my answer here is just kind of touching the tip of the iceberg. If maybe if we do another session and you can be here live, we can get a little bit more feedback and address anything more pinpointed. But I think that gives you some ideas of how exercise is related to our nervous system and all of that. Sometimes people will be told even by their doctor, like, you need to exercise. And a person may be at the capacity level where exercise means walking outside to the mailbox and coming back in. That may be exactly what your body, the level of exercise that you may have to start with, and not be shamed around it. Doesn't look like, running or this or that. Sometimes when we push ourselves and think we have to do that, we're actually setting ourselves further back. And so it is a question that is extremely personal for each person. There are no guidelines even that I could provide for you. It really is about learning the somatic experiencing modality so that you can know what your body is saying. I like this, or ooh, that was too much. So I hope that it provides useful. Yeah, so I have two more questions, and I just want to check in with you guys and make sure everything is landing, everything is making sense. Is there anything that you'd like me to address before going on to the next question? I think the next couple are a little bit shorter, so yeah. Okay. Hi, Eileen.
Hi, Lori. I love everything that you said, and I'm always practicing, this work. But one of the things that I would just add to it, maybe, and I
Yeah.
know it makes a difference in my life, is hydration, is just that water intake. Because I know the difference between, energetically, what I'm feeling like if I don't have enough water in my system as well, and also everything that you had said at finding our own capacity, because I'm not a runner, but I have walked some 5Ks, and walking to the mailbox is evidence that it's some energy that I can use in the body that I'm in today. But I know the difference in the water, and that's the only thing I would add to it. But all the things that you said, I completely agree with.
Yeah, so great, so great. And I just want to say for you, it's such a pleasure to be watching this journey and to see, like, walking that 5K, and the other stuff that you currently do. There were times when that was such a reach, right? That wasn't even something that you would really entertain, as, and now you're just like, yeah, This is who I am. So it's really nice to see how, our capacity could grow when we're giving our system what it needs. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And yeah, absolutely. The water, yeah, and the electrolytes, those kinds of things, we really can't, if we're going to be pushing our body, right, we really do need to make sure. Am I also giving you all the pieces, all the building blocks that you need? And most of the people in my community, midlife and beyond. So it's like, yeah, maybe some of the things that you could have got away with when you were 20, that's not going to work anymore, right? Our systems are a little bit different now and need a little bit of special, not, I mean, I am such a proponent of aging. It doesn't really have to look like maybe what we're told it needs to look like, limitation. But at the same time, we do need to listen. What are the changes that my body's going through? What does it need to stay healthy and vital? So thank you, Eileen. I appreciate that. So let me see. Okay. Okay. Here's a beautiful question. Says, the question is about something to do with dealing with grief and the stress of looking after someone who has a serious condition and isn't the easiest person, but you love them very much and need the patience and healthy coping mechanisms to deal with everyday worries and to do what you need to keep yourself safe and in a space so you can support them to the best of your ability and to practice daily self-love so you're operating from the best version of yourself. Yeah. I think a lot of us can relate to something like this. And there's so much that we could say on this and so much, perspective that I would love to just kind of throw out there. But I want to take the opportunity to say, first of all, I don't have your answers, right? And I'm not telling you this is what you need to do. This is how to do these things, right? I have a beautiful friend and she would always describe the coaching that we do like being the Nordstrom sales representative, Maya, Eileen. And what we do is you're in the dressing room and we're handing you clothes to try on. Hey, how about this dress? How about this blazer? Whatever. You take what you like, you try it on. How does this fit? How does this feel? Oh, I like this. I'm going to keep it. No, that didn't really work for me. You can take this back, right? And that's like what it is. This is just me offering perspective and opportunity for you to try things on, explore them, but your own wisdom. I consider what I do is not offering you wisdom. You don't need wisdom. You have all of that inside you. So I'm maybe offering some questions, some places to explore, some different things to try on. And so that's very much the question for me to mention that, right? You already shared a lot of your own wisdom in just the asking of the question because you recognize that number one, this is challenging. Number two, you need to do things for yourself in order to be able to show up in this very unique and special situation in a resourced way. So let's just take a moment here to recognize what you're doing is challenging. What you're doing is really hard. And sometimes especially when we're caring for somebody who's going through a rough time, we don't allow ourselves to recognize that what we're doing is hard, right? We think they're the ones that have the right to say this is hard, not me, right? But if we can't even recognize that this is hard, how are we going to show up and take care of ourselves and give ourselves what we need if we're not being honest about the fact this is really hard? The fact that it's hard doesn't mean that you don't want to do it or that you're not loving and compassionate. The fact that you can say and acknowledge this is hard is nothing more than just that, right? That acknowledgement. And I think that's important. And I also want to say, thank you for doing that in the world. The world needs people who take care of each other. So even though I don't know your person, thank you for being somebody who offers care and love in the world and for wanting to show up this way for people, and in the work that I do, it's so common that people are telling me one of the triggers that I have with my emotional eating is that I care for my parent, my partner, my friend, whatever it is. brothers, sisters, all kinds of child situations, because it is very taxing. And we can become very triggered by the fact that we have this big responsibility. So let's just start from that place, right? I also, along the same lines, want to really encourage you and give you the permission to be with your emotions. There's grief here. There's stress here. And that grief and that stress, it may feel like if I open up to that and allow myself to feel those things, I'm going to be a mess. I'm not going to be able to take care of myself, let alone anyone else, right? But it's also a very lonely and hard place for the parts of you that are feeling stress and are feeling grief to not have support and an outlet. And so that's kind of a whole separate, we could probably spend another hour on, okay, well, how do I do that, right? But I just want to name the importance of that and giving yourself the permission to be important in this situation too. It's not just you, right? Or it's not just the other person. You're in this situation too, and you're struggling with it, and you're being challenged by it. So let's give permission to you to be important also, and for you to be cared for, right? That's so important, for you to be cared for as much as the other person. So what does that look like, right? What does self-care, self-love look like for you right now in this situation of your life? And the answers would be different for different people. I would need something probably different than you, but giving yourself some space to sit down and asking that question, what do I really need? Sometimes, and this is a question, as I said, I've explored with a lot of people, because it's definitely a trigger for and a need for us to use our coping mechanisms in a place like this. So, speaking for myself, I would need some time where I could just be away with the safety of knowing that I'm not going to be called any second. Because even if we have time, and even if we have considerable time where we can do our own thing, if we know we're on call and we may have to jump out of that in a moment's notice, there is a certain settling that can't happen. And so we don't actually feel recharged, even though we may have had some time to ourselves. So for me, I would need to physically be in a different place. And so if that's a possibility, if that would be helpful to you, if it's a possibility for you, finding those regular times that you can count on, not hoping they'll come along, but I know every Tuesday from 3 to 6 is I have this lovely permission, and I get to go and do something on my own, or every day during these 2 hours, or whatever it is, thinking about, give yourself some time. Sometimes we tend to think like it has to look a certain way. Oh, I have to be there as soon as that person wakes up, or I have to, whatever. But maybe there is a way to carve some space for yourself where it feels safe, that you can settle in knowing, oh, this is my space and it's protected. And I can really let myself recharge during this time. And being very diligent about providing it for yourself. Sometimes we think, if I'm not feeling really stressed and worked up, then I don't need to take the break. But actually, by having the breaks before you get to that point, that's what gives you the resources to be out there, to be doing what it is that you want to do, taking care of this person as the greatest version of yourself. So not waiting until your cup is fully empty, but always be continually. And that's why I love the example in the model that we use of your capacity bank account, right? Making sure, monitoring, and that's something that we always do. Where is my, how many dollars do I have in my capacity bank account right now? And keeping our eye on that, making sure that we stay in the positive, right? That kind of thing. So being really diligent about being honest, what do I really need? What's possible? And then following through, right? And maybe there is, you just mentioned briefly, not the easiest person. And very often the people that we're taking care of are not the easiest people, because they're under stress and they're dealing and they're in pain, or whatever it is for them, right? So that's a very common part of it. Rarely do I get the question, and they're just so lovely and peaceful and easy to take care of. It's much more often that they're challenging in some way. And so asking yourself, what do I need to feel safe in our interactions? Sometimes we think, well, I can't ask for this, or to say, please ask in a different way, or I'd be glad to get that for you as soon as I XYZ, right? We tend to think that, oh, they're struggling, so I should just give myself over completely, be at their beck and call, whatever it is. And if that's not feeling good, to be able to ask for what you need in a skillful way, one that is not, where the resentment doesn't build and things like that. And knowing that you're worthy of that. And sometimes people will say, well, it doesn't do any good. I've asked that and it doesn't do any good. So why bother? Well, the reason why you'd want to bother is because all of your parts are seeing the way you're letting you get treated. And so even if the other person isn't going to change, by you showing up and saying, please speak to me kindly, or that's not okay for me, whatever it is, doing that, even if the other person isn't changing, it's for you. And the parts of you that are there and being witnessed see you. Oh, she's taking care of me. She's got me. I'm in a difficult situation, but at least, I'm being cared for nonetheless. So these are some ideas, that you can get curious and do a little bit of exploring. If you want to do that and then kind of come back with whatever remaining questions or whatever, we can address those in the future. But I think that that's a good place to start, at least. And the final question, and I had a couple that have had this question, and then a couple of people who said, I have a loved one who needs this work and they're not ready to get real about it. So I thought I could kind of address those all in one fell swoop here. And I think, just kind of saying the best way to support someone is really just to love them, let them know that what they're experiencing is normal and natural, right? There's nothing dysfunctional about using food to help us regulate our nervous system, to help us soothe, cope, avoid numb emotions. It makes perfect sense. It's brilliant, really, right? We may not like the consequences, and we may also say, you know what, it's hiding something. It's abandoning myself because I'm not really addressing what my true needs are and what my true emotions are. I'm using it to cut myself off from parts of me. So it may not be the ultimate, right? But there's also nothing to be ashamed of. It makes sense and it kind of works. It's really hard to get rid of things that kind of work, right? So the first thing I think is really to just normalize this experience and to love them and know that they are safe with you. Pushing them into something that they might not be ready for might wake up and really get those rebel parts triggered and upset and make things a little bit harder to even approach. So I think that, just really offering that support and your ear without judgment is one of the most important things that you can do to help someone potentially get ready. Right. I also have a lot of free resources that I wanted to mention, because if there is somebody who's struggling and they're not ready to, really dive deep, they could just maybe look at some of this material. If nothing else, it will help them, I think, gain a sense of self-compassion for where they are, and also maybe hope that there are real tools and real methods that make it much different from the way that they've gone about it in the past. And when I send out this video, I will also send out a link to those resources, and also know I'm really committed, especially recently, to producing a YouTube video a week in order to, address questions like these and other things. So that's a great resource that people can just take a look at. And because again, a lot of people feel that sense of, my life preserver is going to be ripped away and I don't know how to swim. And that's the worst thing that I want to do with someone, is ever to put them in that position. So those are some ideas for how to work with somebody who doesn't feel ready yet. And maybe, you're one of the people who sent in wondering about my own readiness. I have done things in the past, right? I hear this all the time. I've been in therapy for 15 years. It did absolutely nothing. Or I, have read all these books. Oh yeah, know that book, did this program, whatever. And it didn't work for me. And I just want to say, like, yeah, that's a big deal, because there is a lot, I feel like, and there, I feel like a lot of these resources are good, but they don't bring all the pieces into one place at the same time. So it can be really challenging to know, like, well, what are all the pieces and how does my nervous system play into that? And that's one piece I feel like, even though the nervous system, we're understanding it and we're understanding its implications in areas like emotional eating and other addiction and all of that, but it's still, those resources are not out there as much as they need to be. And so I just want to encourage anyone who feels like, I'm not ready, or I don't know if I'm ready. I'm afraid to fail again. I'm afraid to try something, have it not work, and then have to be in the disappointment of how it feels to, because of course we're going to make that a story about how we failed, when in reality it wasn't, you didn't have all the tools necessary, the comprehensive set of skills and practices and tools and support. So if you're not feeling ready, I would ask you to just get curious about that again. What is that unreadiness about? No judgment around it. This isn't for the point of hurry up and get ready. This is for the point of, I wonder what's behind that. What kind of support might I need? What would I need to get comfortable to even start to look at the next step? And that's a beautiful place to be too. And there's no hurry. So that is my thoughts on that. And also remembering to, one of the biggest things that I really hope you take away from this session is the piece about the capacity. Again, if you don't have capacity, nothing you try is going to work. Nothing you try is going to work. I don't care. I could give you the best information in the world. But if you can't integrate it, either because I give it to you, just dump it on you, and you're like trying to figure out do I do with this, right? That's why the bite-sized approach is so important. I got to give it to you in a way that you can assimilate it all in little pieces. But I think the capacity piece is why 95% of people have tried things and failed. And that's where we start. So know that there is different ways to go about working with this challenge. And I hope that's that you can take away. It's not your fault. It really isn't. It's just a very simple matter of capacity, no capacity. Yeah. So thank you guys. I know that this has been a lot, and I hope I did a good job of answering, questions. There were a few, but I think that I tried to work them in, and knew that as I was answering one, I was kind of addressing some other things that are out there. So I appreciate all of you who are here live, and of course those of you who sent me questions or just didn't have a question but said thanks for doing the session, I can't make it live. That means a lot to me, because I know that, I try really hard and work really hard to figure out what are people needing, because obviously that's what I want to provide. So when you let me know that you appreciate this, or hey, I'm really liking the course, I didn't have any questions, but again, I appreciate you creating this space or whatever, that really helps me. Okay, good. That's the kind of information that I want to keep producing. So yeah, I love your feedback. Thank you. And anything else before we sign off here today and we get this recording out to all the beautiful folks who couldn't be here live? Yeah, Eileen, yeah.
So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to go through and with a very universal approach, because this work is very individual, but very relatable with challenges as well. And there was I like the content because I've been able to learn and relearn, and it's always good to come back and revisit or maybe listen to it in another way to integrate, or just even a reminder just to show up for myself, because I'll still be working on this, information, but I might be in a different capacity level or a different age, things like that. So this recording, could I share that?
Absolutely.
Buddy,
Yeah,
it'll
I'm
be
gonna
available.
put it
Okay.
up on YouTube
Okay.
so that you have the link and it'll be available.
I think maybe the not ready part and just even saying somebody not ready,
Yeah.
and just listen to it. And when they are, they'll be able to have an idea or resource or all the free content that you have as well. Um, People listen to things differently, and I know I listen to it. I'll listen to this again as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's just going to be a really it's just a process oriented, like the rungs on the ladder or the step or the bite size or stepping stone or whatever, you know, doing this process means, but it's a practice and you have to practice for it to work. It's not like one and done because we'll always have challenges with food. We'll always have challenges with exercise, water, sleep, you know, whatever it is. But it reminds me that, you know, there's 5 areas and getting support makes a difference or having community because I like walking with other people
Yeah.
helps it go by faster. I know that about myself. Some people would rather walk alone and just put in their earbuds.
Yep.
So it's just all the learnings of that and the nuances depending on what I need today.
Mhm.
And I just really appreciate not only learning or relearning, but also that you're on the journey with us as well. And you do your own, you know, whether it's a marathon or a 10K or whatnot, and I'm doing the walking, we're all in it kind of together. And I think that universal message is so important.
Mm.
And your commitment. So I really do appreciate it. And that it became available for me today. Um, that I was able to still continue to do the work and process and then be able to go back to it and then be able to share it
Yeah.
with people who maybe I could have a conversation with somebody else and say, well, this could be, you know, one aspect of the work where you're not in it alone, or I totally get it, you know, that kind of thing, and that we're all in it together. So thanks for making it available.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to spend time with you as always. Yeah, and receive your input and your brilliance. So thank you. All right. Anybody who is watching the replay, please know that during this time right here, especially this month, we're gearing up for a master class next month, and you'll get as long as you're on the email list, you will get an invitation to come to that, and it'll be, really addressing the 3 foundational keys of the program and how it works. But in the meantime, I'm really open to questions that come about through the breakup with emotional eating class, and anything that stemmed from our discussion today. So just know that, and I will look forward to questions and comments and just relating more about this beautiful journey we're on. So thank you guys. See you soon. Bye bye.